Hi, so I'm going to do a short overview of our new action area. I'll just sign into my sample demo system here as an administrator. So I've got a few logins, so this one just got me. If you are, looking at this video and you've noticed, why is my menu on the left? You can at any point in time decide to switch your view, so keep that in mind. A lot of people like the side menu or top menu. You can make your choice. But what are actions and what would they be used for? We've added actions to really supplement all kind of system areas, and unlike a workflow, they can occur in parallel. They can be triggered based on certain statuses, but rather than then being sent to someone to approve or authorize, someone can be set up to notify and view and access that completed action. So I guess one key example that you might think about or want to implement might be something like an induction checklist that might be sent out, and people can gradually start to complete that checklist as they go through their first weeks of employment. And again, if I kind of gradually fill that out and close it down, and reopen it up, like other areas, it's got that kind of save as you go function, so it's going to remember what I've clicked to do. It does have standard validation, so if I try and complete something and items are missing, it will force me to fill them out. The validation at the moment, you won't get the red boxes you might be familiar with these kind of new pop-up models that we've got. It's been slightly different on how we can implement that. Actions can be centrally managed and tracked under the action area. So the mail icon up the top is really for personal actions. This table here allows us to go through and view all outstanding actions that are in the system. We recently did introduce this ability to view custom fields. You might want to switch that off from the standard view, and I'll explain why. You can see that's created quite an extended detail view, so we can't see many actions at a time. But we can always see that detail if I, for example, filter this area for an induction checklist. So I could filter and go to type. If I filter for one type at a time, we'll actually get all the custom field data shown in columns. I might actually need to re-enable that back. So if I go search, so what you'd actually see is every single item that we'd added as a custom field shown on the right in a column-based format, and that does allow us to get a quick extract. I'm just going to quickly switch off those custom fields again. We might look at fixing the height in the next release just for some of those longer. That induction checklist was taken as a bit of an extreme example. But in terms of setting up and using the action area to start, there are some basic things you'd need to do. All of your systems, unless you've got different profile names, may have already had the form enabled, but you may just not been aware of what you needed to add or set up. So you do need to make sure that under the to-do action area, standard staff have at least read access, and your main administration profile should have this HR admin ticked. The second thing, and this really only affects some older clients, so if your standard security profile hasn't added the required permissions, remember that we have to be conscious if we add a new feature to not automatically assume what certain employees or managers should view. But the best thing that I would suggest doing is open up one of your people you know is a basic manager or a basic employee. Open up their user account. Go across to account view permissions. Select to do as the module and actions as the form. And in order for the actions to operate, your managers will typically need to be able to view their own record and their staff record in that action area, and and a normal employee profile. So I'm going to open up our fake employee here. Should have access to view their own record on that same to-do actions form. If that's not ticked for standard employees for any reason, get in touch with us. You can fix that yourself. I wouldn't want to do that individually for a few hundred employees. But one thing you can do is adjust your standard security templates, and that will allow you to set those view permissions. And you could, reset the existing, go through, tick your employees and managers, and update their accounts based on those new templates. But if that does get you stuck, get in touch with support at ActionHRM, and we'll help you out. So I guess actions themselves, the first thing to be able to use the action area, we need to set up some what we term action types. And I'm going to give a short version today rather than an extended one, but at the moment the system supports a certain number of action types, and we can also, that there are some special actions like this employee approval that's used for an onboarding type of scenario where a manager might suggest to hire someone from the recruitment area or create a new employee, and that goes through some sort of approval before conversion. So I'll probably treat that as a second case. Some of the basic actions that you might find or get a value from quickly are things like actions to send out electronic acceptance of policies and procedures. To go back to our action area first, I'm just going to bring up an existing action on my sample system to show you what that might look like. So I'm going to filter this area for other actions. I'm going to go down to a password policy that I've created. And if we sent this action out to staff members, they'd be forced to scroll through that content and then electronically accept or confirm that content. So I'm going to set up and show you what you'd need to add to complete that on the system. Firstly, you'd need to go to admin, to do admin, go to action types, go down and click on plus. I don't necessarily need to call it policy and procedure, although that allows me to give it a category, but I'm just going to call it content acceptance, just for a generic label. I'd pick the task type, so we'd want to pick content acknowledgement. That allows us to provide content that people can accept or deny. Default title and description. If you were regularly sending out the same content, we might want to put in, I don't know, policy A, for example. I don't need a description optional, but you could put that in. I don't know, internet safe use or something like that. You can switch off priority and status and things like that, again, or switch it on. Typically, you will want to notify people when that's created, so they get an email advising them they've got something to do, like a workflow. You might want to notify, you might want to not be notified when it's completed, and instead, from that admin perspective, search and see who hasn't or hasn't done it. In addition to notifying the person or having an option to notify the person who's raised it, you can type in a generic email address. So, or email addresses. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to add colours. I'm not a colourful. I don't like a whole lot of colour codes and things on our system, but you can add different colour codes if required. We can restrict who can view and who can create or who could modify the action. I'm going to assume that I really only want these actions to be started by administrators. View and edit I'll talk about later, but there might be confidential actions that you send out to staff where you don't want managers, and that's who could view that employee, to be able to see that action or its content. So that's the concept of the view permissions. We can have action administrators. They're sort of like workflow administrators that allow people to see actions that relate to other stuff outside of their tree. Default content, I mentioned if we were regularly sending a certain piece of content, we might want to load that content actually into the system itself. So I'm going to copy, probably not a whole lot of content, but I'm just going to copy a kind of policy document I've got handy here, and I'm going to paste that in and click on save. So now I've got that action type created. I mean, I could manually as an administrator go and add that action for certain people to complete. I could click on plus, put in the target date of when I want it to be completed. I'd pick my type, content acceptance. I'd also pick the people I want to action it. That could be everybody in the company, or I could filter based on some certain condition. You know, everybody in my admin department, for example, needs to do it. I'd pick my type. If I pick a type, I mean, if I didn't preload a title and any content, I would be forced to actually input the title of what I'm trying to send out. And at times for actions, you may want to keep an action type generic and then, you know, really paste that content that you want directly in that area when you're sending that action. If we were talking about an onboarding scenario though, where we always want that sent out with any new employee, we'd want to make sure that default content was loaded. And I can show you that kind of case as well. But if I click on tick, at that point, you know, all the actions are created and the staff that had that allocated would be notified. You know, if they logged into the system, they would see, you know, their action under the to-do. Here I've got one of the sample actions we've just created. Click on the icon. They can, you know, scroll down and then complete that content. So that's one simple example of using the system to send out content that you want to be acknowledged. Another example I'm going to go through is if you wanted to, you might want to send out a small, whether it is a survey or an informal kind of catch-up as an example. So I think Holly's kindly enough set up a nice action on the system for that, and that was one of our performance development plan part 1. So I'm going to send out an example of this to a few staff, and you can select them individually or again do it en masse. I'm going to call this the monthly performance catch-up and click on tick. And what I'm going to do is just open up this action, and then I'll explain, you know, what I would have needed to have done to actually create this. And you can see here with this, we've got a simple action where we've basically got a kind of survey. We might have a 1 to 5 drop down, a date box, a text input, and really we're forcing someone to complete that kind of, you know, basic survey. Again, one of the beauties of that custom field approach, you know, if you imagine we sent this out to all our employees, and I might want to have a look and see what everybody's written in that performance development plan survey. We could apply our filter, make sure we get our custom fields added, so wherever we want, search, and I'd actually be able to see, you know, the responses that each of the people have put in that area, easily extract and report on them as well. And that might not only be for incomplete, but also for completed actions as well. So again, you could filter those out, you know, yes, I'm satisfied, I'm having a great job and I love it. So let's talk about what was used to create that action. Really, one of the things that we would have needed to firstly create was a set of custom fields or inputs. If you haven't used this area, it's really powerful. It allows you to create field sets that we might link to workflows for forms or other kind of custom inputs. So somewhere down here, if I open up our, I'm just trying to see what, I didn't add this before, so let me just add a fresh one. So I'm going to click on plus to add my new field set. I need to give it my label. I'm going to call it performance catch-up. I don't know, meeting date. I'm going to have a date input. Did you meet face to face? I don't know, I might want a yes or no box. How is everything going? I mean, just at the moment I am trying to squash my screen just to make my video size small, so don't be annoyed if they're small. You can always provide pop-up boxes as well. So we'll put in a little question prompt for pop-up guidance. So now I've got my field set, I'd go to my to-do admin area, action type, click on plus. I'm going to select my task. I'm going to input my label, so performance catch-up. Again, this is where we might, if we want to regularly send it, we might want that as the title. It might seem like a bit of duplication, but I'm then going to link the set of field or field sets that I want to attach to this task. And then again, I might want to restrict who can start and stop it. But essentially that's it. You know, we've created a generic task that has a set of fields attached to it. I go to do actions, click on plus, I pick my date, I'm going to pick the action type I want, performance catch up, pick the people that need to do it. I'm just going to pick Emily, click on tick. I have got this page filtered at the moment, so I'm just going to reset that anyway, so it gets us back to a clear filter set. But if I go up to plus, we're going to have our performance catch up for Emily to complete. And then this is the sample of the action we're asking to complete. So did I have a catch up and improve ABC? So I'm just going to quickly explain one other key action, and I think in terms of onboarding and how they integrate with performance, it's probably worthwhile doing a separate video on each. But I guess just as a first point, if I brought up a normal performance review that you might have in progress, and I'll just go over to our performance area. I don't know, I'm going to open up, I don't know if Grant has any actions, but let's open up his review. So one of the things that you and your employees will now have access to in the performance area is a view of the actions that have been completed or are outstanding for that employee. And it really becomes basically like a working area where, for example, rather than a review containing lots of fixed objectives, we might have throughout the year added different goals or continue to add goals, you know, to our action area. And employees and managers can be restricted, again, by what actions they can actually start or create. So that might be, you know, if an employee or manager comes to this area, they can only create, you know, a performance objective or a goal. You know, goal types, the mini goals especially, can have the standard kind of pop-up rating scales that are used in our performance area. It also might mean, from an employees and managers perspective, at the end of the review, rather than just noting down changes that might need to be made, we can actually record them as actions. that then form part of a rolling plan for that employee. And then, the next time in the review, we can easily look at that kind of completed performance of certain goals or actions or activities over that last year. Really simplifying the performance framework, so rather than having multiple fixed objectives I'm assessing at the end of the year, it might be a simple rate your overall goal performance in light of the goals that were agreed or processed throughout the year. So I'm going to pause this video here, get a breath of air and water, and come back into the next one.